Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. From Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. From Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. From Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. From Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. from Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. From Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state. From Kerala as the sixth coronavirus case has been reported in the state.
Mind your mind. Yesterday we had a discussion with three esteemed guests, and today we'll be continuing a discussion on depression and suicidal tendencies amongst students. Today we have the great honor to be joined by three very esteemed professionals in the field. Firstly, we'll be joined by Dr. Kishore. Dr. Kishore sir is an associate professor in the JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research in Mysore, sir, for joining us. And then we'll be joined by Dr. Arun. He's an associate professor in the field of psychiatry from CMC Vellore, Christian Medical College Vellore. And we'll also be joined by Dr. Suhas Chandran in psychiatry in St. John's Medical College, Bengaluru. Dr. Suhas is busy at the moment. He has COVID duty and he'll be joining us soon. We are really delighted to continue the session today. We had many questions come regarding many of the issues that our students are facing. We have been able to help many of the students. Our faculties yesterday provided answers, and we shall also be having a Q&A session after today's three sessions. We really hope this helps our viewers who are viewing our program from Google Meet and the live streaming on YouTube as well. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Arun sir to take over the floor. Arun sir, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Basil. It's been a great opportunity to interact with you all. I'll just share my screen and see. Yeah. Can you see my slides? Okay, sure. So I think I've been interested with the opportunity and the task of discussing with you on conditions associated with suicide. In fact, I was actually attending yesterday's 7 topics as well. So I think the participants would have gone through what depression is or what suicide is, then the psychological aspect of it, then biological aspect. I think Dr. Sebin has a brilliant presentation. And subsequently, there's also Dr. Manoj has enlightened us about the how to approach for a care and all. So I think I'll just take it forward from there. Most of the yesterday's topic I felt, or it was pertaining to looking at self. Whereas in this presentation, I thought I will take you through a journey wherein you can also look at like how can I help others, and for which we need to know what all are the conditions associated with suicide. So before going into the details, I thought I just have 4 points on understanding suicide. Since you are all are young budding medical graduates, you might be knowing treating a lot of patients with fever, but you also realize that fever is just a symptom. For example, COVID also comes with a fever, pneumonia comes with a fever, tuberculosis comes with a fever. So you treat fever as a symptom, but at the same time, you will look at the underlying cause as well. So same way, if you look at suicide also, some of the suicides can be a symptom uh, like fever. We'll come to the explanations of explanations regarding these points later on. Second thing is like there's always a feeling that suicide is a sign of mental weakness, whereas we should take note that suicide is not a sign of mental weakness. Again, we will discuss these matters so that you will be much more capable enough to help others. Um, I think if you have gone through medical wards, ICU care, and all, I think ultimately the cause of death for many of our patients will be mentioned as cardiorespiratory arrest, which means that ultimately a person pass away because of cardiorespiratory arrest, but the underlying different. For example, somebody can have a cardiorespiratory arrest secondary to heart attack. Another person can be having a cardiorespiratory arrest secondary to COPD. So cardiorespiratory arrest is a final outcome of multiple causes. Same way, if you actually see suicide can also be a final outcome of many situations or many causes. So that is also something which we need to keep in mind. Then there is a common notion that all those who commit suicide are mentally ill. I would like to emphasize on the fact that most of the suicides might not be related to mental illness. So, so these are 4 points I think we should keep in mind while trying to help others or even help ourselves with suicide. So, with this understanding, I thought I know Dr. Sebind has mentioned somewhat similar picture or pictorial depiction yesterday, but even while understanding the conditions associated with suicide, it might be appropriate to consider some biological conditions which are associated, psychological conditions which are associated, and social conditions which are associated, which ultimately will have a common pathway leading on to suicide. So, if we can recollect what we discussed yesterday, it was mostly about depression. So, we understand that depression is not the only psychiatric disorder which is associated with suicide. For example, addiction. If you recollect during lockdown period, I think from Kerala there has been a few reports of people with alcohol addiction committing suicide. I don't know about whether it is factual or not, but I could read it in media that a few of people have committed addiction, committed suicide. So other psychiatric conditions also like psychosis, anxiety, which again Sabin mentioned yesterday. So there are quite a few psychiatric disorders which can be associated as a condition with suicide. But see this slide. In fact, people with chronic medical conditions can also attempt suicide or commit suicide. For example, chronic pain, people with chronic diabetes mellitus, people with malignancy, or various other neurological disorders. So see, none of these conditions are mental illness. That's what I mentioned in the previous slide. We might think that suicide is associated with mental illness, but it is not so all the time. So this is something which has to be kept in mind. Now, if you look at the psychological state, I thought of putting it as state because it can vary across time frame. For example, if I ask Basil now, like, is it raining? He might say it's not raining. But in Kerala, after 15 minutes, it may start raining. So same way, I think these are some of our mental state which can vary from time to time. So a few of these have already been discussed by Dr. Divya and Sepin yesterday. For example, a hopeless state, a feeling like nothing is going to improve, nothing is going to change. An impulsive state. For example, it is very relevant on today's date because results have come up in our days and all. I've seen, like, okay, whenever there is a plus one, plus two result comes or 10th result comes, there will be a few reports of some of the students attempting suicide or unfortunately committing suicide. So it happens as an impulsive thing. So something bad happened to them, and suddenly they thought everything is hopeless, meaningless, and they suddenly get into an act of suicide. Other part we need to keep in mind is like a stress coping state, whereas it's actually a balance between stress and the coping. Something which I feel as stress need not be stress for somebody else in the audience. Same way, if we both have the same stress, the way we are coping with that might also change across individual or across situation. Today, I might be able to cope with a particular stress. Tomorrow, I will not be able to cope with the same stress because my coping might change. So these are some psychological states also that can actually finally result in a suicide thought or an act. So I'll just show you one picture. So everybody can look at it and see which one are you. Like, will you consider it as half full or half empty? This is exactly what yesterday all the esteemed panel members mentioned about cognitive error. Like, so the way you look at things will also decide the way you feel. So if you feel that, okay, I'm half full, I think you will feel satisfied. If you look at the other way, like, okay, there is something empty, I think there are more reasons for you to be dissatisfied. Psychological state which has to be kept in mind while dealing with suicide. Uh, so moving on to social situation, I thought I'll emphasize more on this aspect in my presentation because I think this is one area where all of us can contribute. By a lay person, young generations like you, it can be by psychiatrists also. So, for example, like socioeconomic deprivation is something which actually leads someone to think about suicide or think about harming oneself. It can be easily seen. In recently also in the US, there is a debate between, okay, race, white and black. If it come to India, it can be based on the caste. So see, these are social situations. This is not mental illness. This is not psychological state, but it's just a social situation which actually makes someone deprived of. Another one is a change in life situation with which I will definitely, this lockdown period is one good example for that. See, almost every person would have had a good dream. What should I be doing in March, April, or May? So think about a farmer who has actually invested quite a lot of money into his agriculture field, and suddenly you realize that because of lockdown you don't get sufficient market. So it's as abrupt change in my life situation, which might take me through the. Another thing which has to be kept in mind, I think everybody should focus on this, is the availability of the agent and non-availability of the support. With which I mean that, see, even if I am having depression, even if I'm going through chronic pain, even if I'm impulsive, even if I'm going through change in life situation, see, I need to have some agent to fulfill my willingness to go with suicide. And at the same time, should also be something like non-availability of support. So, for example, if I have the weapon with me, if I have all the previous things satisfied. Still, if I'm in a supportive environment, I might not. So I think this balance is very important wherein we all can contribute. Another one is media portrayal. I think all the psychiatrists who have been attending this thing, Seville and all would have definitely agreed to the fact that how media a suicide act will also have an influence on other people. So somebody who is on the brim of feeling hopeless, somebody who is on the brim of feeling depressed, somebody who is on the edge of some deprivation, yet another push by the media glorifying suicide or giving much details about suicide so that the person will tilt towards thinking forward, which is very well evident in the recent thing. For example, if you look at Sushant case and all, you see almost every media was making it more sensational, making it in different coverage. Definitely urge all of you to just go through the daily, the Hindu. For example, many times I have seen that daily doesn't portray suicide in the front page. Whenever they are actually mentioning suicide, they will also give a toll-free number on which you can contact for suicide prevention. In fact, they are following the WHO guidelines. So media portrayal can also sometimes be a triggering factor. One, I would say the stigma and the stereotype, with which I mean it's not only about mental illness or anything. See, now I've heard like in when a Keralite has returned from abroad, I think in one particular village or and the local people have actually shouted at them or wanted them to move away from their house or something. So it's basically like you're stereotyping that before like 10th exam or 12th exam. Okay, there's a hardcore belief that that is the major exam that you're going to attend, and that is the life-changing event in your life. So these are certain stereotypes or stigma to mention. So these can also accelerate or generate suicide or suicide thoughts in individuals. About the various biological, psychological, and social situations that can be associated with suicide. I haven't covered the entire detail, but a few. So now if you understand what suicide is, so suicide can be a symptom. It need not be a mental illness. It can be the outcome of many events. So, and you understand these are the biopsychosocial conditions that can be associated. It should lead us to adopt appropriate intervention. I think that's what we all are here. Like so if it is not alone a symptom, I think the underlying cause or the causes has to be addressed. So, for example, a suicide prevention should also involve dealing with the depression, if it is depression, dealing with psychological state, if it is psychologically driven, which Dr. Divya has mentioned yesterday, or dealing with social situations, if it is a lack of support. Mental weakness, I think we all should encourage ourselves and encourage others to express their thoughts and feelings. Because many times what happens is like when somebody feels that, okay, feeling suicidal or thinking about suicide is a sign of mental weakness, they would be hesitant to open up. At the same time, if we have that kind of a similar idea, we will also be approaching them in that way. But if you personally don't consider it as a mental weakness, I think we will definitely encourage anybody who is approaching us. We ourselves will be feeling confident to express that, okay, I am feeling something like this. What can I do about that? I think we should just know that the myth buster, which says that if somebody is expressing suicidal thought, talking about suicide does not increase that risk, because many people have a false belief that, see, if somebody is expressing suicidal thoughts and I try to sit with him and then talk about how do you feel or what makes you think so, am I pushing him more towards making that decision? It's not so. Many times, if we give that person as an opportunity, he might come out of that. So, in nutshell, I'm not saying like we should purely follow a medical treatment. We should purely follow psychological or social intervention. I think a mix of all these things will help us to help others who are into this situation. So having understood that, um, we should also think about how best we can prevent that. So for any sort of conditions, we look at prevention, no? So adopting a healthy lifestyle. Yesterday, Dr. Savin was mentioning about the diet, exercise, sleep. So I think all those healthy lifestyle will actually help us our stress coping balance, uh, will make us more at ease or more at peace. So this can also be shared with others also. Keeping away from addiction. As I mentioned, among psychiatric disorder, it is not only depression. Addiction is also one of the major cause. Addiction can be yet another way of preventing. Enhance social support. For example, as I told you, it's a mix of a feeling to commit suicide and you have an agent along with you and the non-availability of the support system. So if you have a better social support system, I think it will take us way forward. So all the platform that you are sharing now, for example, now you have a group of people. You are not only dealing with the medical education, you are actually going beyond that. So these are actually like a coming together and sharing kind of a feeling. You can enhance this kind of a support framework, and it's brilliant. As we all are into the medical field, proper treatment of other medical conditions should also be looked into. Because now that when you cross your internship and graduate, means not every of one of the participant might be joining psychiatry. So, but even if you're not in psychiatry, I think you definitely have a role. And obviously, the stereotype or the stigma redressal can also be looked into at an individual level. So that's how I think we should move forward. So if you ask me, like, what if each of the participant in this meeting thinks, what can I do? I think we all should be moving and looking forward. How best I can alleviate the social conditions. We might not be getting the exact solution for all the social condition, but we definitely will have something to contribute. We should definitely encourage prevention. And I think the next two speakers will also be looking at how an individual can be a link between. So if somebody is having a suicidal ideation, how best I can act as a link between that particular person and the solution at one end. There are two different systems the next speakers are going to talk about. So with that, I will conclude.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure that all of those points will be very useful for our students at your time. Seven, sir, you just made a point regarding alcohol in Kerala. Would you be willing to share it with us, sir? Seven, sir. Seven, sir wrote in the comments that addiction and suicide in Kerala. We have suicides when the beverage is closed, probably due to the withdrawal delirium, consuming substitutes for alcohol like sanitizers, craving, etc. We have suicides during the lockdown related to people not being able to cope with the change in lifestyle, some of which included taking alcohol, and we had suicides again when beverages opened, and violence under the influence of alcohol as well. That is true. Next, I will be inviting Dr. Suhas sir. Dr. Suhas Chandran is an assistant professor of psychiatry in St. John's Medical College, Bengaluru. He's joining us after his co-viewing. I've had a busy schedule today. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Thank you for your time. Suhas sir?
Yeah. Hi, Basil. I'm just going to try and share my PowerPoint.
Yes, sir.
It says Dr. Arun is still presenting. So,
Okay, 1 minute. I think, is it okay now?
yes, sir, it is.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Hi, are the slides visible? Right, thanks.
Yes, sir, it is.
So yeah, I'll just start off if the slides are visible. So hi, I'm Dr. Suhas. I'm assistant professor in psychiatry at St. John's Medical College, Bangalore. So I'm going to talk to you about how help seeking can be a preventive factor in suicide with a focus on young adults and medical students. And I believe yesterday and today. Hello, yeah. So I believe over yesterday and today you have had different speakers talk to you about the biological aspects, psychological aspects, the sort of risk factors, and some basics in management of suicide. So I'm going to sort of try to talk about how help seeking can actually prevent suicide and parasuicides. And it's basically based on one important message that the more the health seeking efficacy that is there, the greater likelihood that a suicide can be prevented. Help seeking efficacy, what I basically mean is knowing when to seek help, where to seek help from, and how to seek help. So this itself is a protective factor in suicide. I'm also going to be talking strictly from an experience perspective, from the perspective of working in a medical college with medical students, and being involved in well-being initiatives for them, sort of treating medical students who have had depression, students who have from different parts of the city who have actually attempted suicide. So a lot of what I talk about will be more from the experiential perspective rather than a strictly theoretical perspective. And also because things that sort of apply to a medical student and young adults is sort of different from what you see in different populations, right? So the first aspect is when to actually seek help. So though there are many red flag things, and I'm sure in the yesterday's presentation I was not able to attend it, but I'm sure it was covered. What are the overt signs when you definitely have to seek help? Some of the subtler signs can actually get missed. And when I say subtle signs, this includes some of these that are mentioned in the slides. For example, when your own sense of well-being is compromised. For example, well-being here I refer to as emotional well-being. When the emotional quality of your individual responses is sort of compromised. When you consistently and persistently feel that something is just not right, and it becomes hard to get through the entire day. I heard Dr. Arun speak about a physical model of illness, for example, a fever. So there are some fevers that you just can't shake off, and you're not able to place a fever within any syndrome or within any illness, but the fever lasts for a very, very long time. Think of it like, say, a pyrexia of unknown origin. So similarly, well-being and emotional well-being can also feel like that. So when you're feeling like that for a very, very long time, then that's sort of an indicator that this individual needs to seek help. The second is when you develop very frank symptoms. These include symptoms like low mood, sadness that last for very large parts of the day, a lack of pleasurable to you, easy fatigability, feeling tired almost all the time, sleep disturbances, disturbance with your appetite, a sense of helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness, and sometimes even death wishes, wishing you're dead, or even moving on to the contemplating suicide. These are sort of those indicators that you need to be seeking help. Also, when your usual coping methods don't work, all of us have different coping methods. We have different support systems. For some of us, it is talking to a family, it is talking to our friends. For some of us, it's talking to a teacher, a mentor, so on and so forth. So sometimes this sort of coping mechanism is enough to sort of mitigate a crisis from becoming something larger. But some coping methods, your usual coping methods, does not seem to work. So that is also an indication that this is time to seek help. And fourthly is when a crisis or unexpected loss occurs. This could be the death of a loved one, you're close to bereavement of any sorts, or any other crisis, for example. For example, I've had medical students who have been diagnosed with a very disabling physical illness and then sort of go and attempt suicide. So any sort of crisis and unexpected loss occurs, it is also sort of grounds for seeking help. happens. Again, when I say traumatic, I mean things like I mentioned before. For example, you've been in an accident, you have lost somebody you're close to, you know somebody who has lost somebody you're close to, even things like abuse and bullying, so that's also traumatic. I've had a lot of students, a lot of young adults, not just medical students, engineering students, come and seek help for, when they have been abused. I'm talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse, and bullying in any forms, even emotional bullying that sort of occurs, cyberbullying that occurs. So when something traumatic has happened, it sort of tests your capacity to deal with it. So that's also another indication where you could seek help. And finally, and some of one of the most common reasons why we see young adults with depression and OPD is issues with their academics. They've tried far too long, and they've tried their best to do well in academics, but just doesn't seem to work out. I'm one of those who inherently believe that nobody chooses to do badly in academics. So somebody is doing badly, there is some reason for that. And for a lot of them, they sort of enclose it within their shell. They don't sort of seek help for it, and if left intervened or untreated, that itself can increase your vulnerability to develop a mental health condition. So these are some of the subtler things that you can look for, not just in yourself, but in people you know and in your peers, and sort of recognize that these are indicators to seek help. Of course, these are some of the red flag signs, or rather things that are more easier to recognize when help is required. For example, social withdrawal or isolation. A person is isolating from his friends, his family, his community around him. That's a sign. When they have dramatic mood swings, this mood swings can involve episodes of irritability, getting angry for trivial issues for very, very long durations, hostility that can come across. I've had a lot of people project sort of these red flag signs in terms of talking, writing, or thinking about death. Recently, I had a very young adult come to the OPD who have been writing poems that consistently involved a theme of death. So everybody has their own way of sort of expressing their distress, and for some of them, it could be in some of these forms: impulsive, reckless behavior, aggressive behavior, hostility, increased substance use. Actually, substance use is one common coping mechanism that is used to sort of deal with depression, mood issues, and though transiently people feel it can sort of make it better, on the long term itself, it sort of makes it worse. So these are some of the telltale signs or things, or some pointers that you could look for when a person sort of needs help for suicide assessment as such. Why do people not seek help, especially young adults? What are the barriers that they come across to seeking care? One is a lack of time. I've had a lot of people students tell me, sir, I'm in the medical college the entire time. I go, it goes from 9 to 4. Then we have special classes, and after that we have a study group. I have to prepare for the clinics tomorrow. There is record work. It doesn't seem to end. So there is no time to actually come and sort of take help, even whether that's with a mental health professional or with a student counselor. Lack of convenient access. So here I mean two things. Access is, for example, students tell us, see doctor, when we are finally free, you are not free. So there's nobody, the OPD doesn't run at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. for us to come and consult you. So there is a lack of access to mental health help. For some people, they tell us that, I know in terms of government medical college, Thrissur, you are sort of lucky in the sense you have a very good psychiatry department, you have a lot of keen interest and knowledge about mental health. But there are different students and different young adults in different parts of a country where access to mental health is not easy. Here, it's not that they don't want help. Even if they want help, they just don't have any sort of such services available. I have a student I know in Allahabad who lives in a village in Allahabad and has to travel 120 kilometers to seek help from a psychiatrist. And he's doing medicine. It is extremely hard. The college doesn't have a functional department of psychiatry. So that's what I sort of mean by with lack of access. There's a lot of concerns regarding confidentiality, and in the sense that, I go talk to a psychiatrist, I go talk to a counselor, or why professionals, I even go talk to a senior or a teacher. Will they keep it a secret? Will they discuss among themselves? So that sort of fear sort of prevents people from coming forward and seeking help. Stigma associated with mental health, and probably one of the people think of me, like Dr. Arun said, people often think they will be considered weak if they seek help, that mental health problems, depression, and attempting suicide is a sign of weakness. So that stigma itself can sort of encapsulate the problem and prevent them from coming forward. Fear of being judged and losing professional respect. It's a competition nowadays in medical colleges. People are constantly trying to get ahead of everybody. So you sort of think that what will my friends think? What if that person goes and tells a teacher? How will I be able to? Will I lose the respect that I have from my friends? This is another common concern that they have. Concerns about cost. Now, this might not be very relevant to some of you here, but I've had experiences where a lot of students, especially those in rural areas, have not been able to sort of afford medications. Some of these medications they're not expensive as such, but say you're taking it for 5 years. I mean, then it sort of starts, running into your expenses. So that is an issue. Failure to recognize that a problem exists. The first step in solving any problem is to actually recognize that there is one, something that we call mental health literacy. So a lot of people are actually unaware what a mental health illness is. And if you don't know what you have is a problem. For example, if you see, if you have symptoms of depression or an anxiety disorder, and you do not think of it like something morbid or as a problem, that itself can be a barrier to help seeking. The other one is a common one is belief that treatment does not work. I've heard a lot of people say that, this treatment, how will medications actually help a problem in the mind? Medications is something that you take for conditions like asthma, for fever, for dengue. How will it actually help mental health illness? I've actually heard people say this. There's a lot of, to the contrary, I've heard people say a lot of myths such as you will get addicted to any medication that you take, So a lot of myths associated with treatment itself can sort of prevent help seeking. Normalization of symptoms. This is something that I sort of see very much, especially in the medical college that I work in and other colleges affiliated to us, where we are students referred to us from other colleges, is normalization of symptoms. They feel that, not being able to sleep, or feeling more anxious and nervous than usual, or say even having a panic attack is a normal part of being a young adult or being a student or doing a professional course that is very demanding. Now, once you normalize something that is abnormal, you're never going to seek help for it. So this is also something that very commonly I see in a lot of young adults. So who do you actually seek help from when you want to seek help? Okay, these are barriers that you overcome. You also recognize the signs that, there is something wrong. So who do you seek help from? So I always suggest that there are different levels in which that you can seek help from. Peers, to start off with. For example, these could be your classmates, it could be a close friend, or it could even be an acquaintance sometimes, just going and telling them that these are sort of symptoms that you experience will actually help. Seniors, these are people who have gone through the stressors that you have gone through, people who have passed all the obstacles or most of the obstacles that you're going through. So sometimes they will be able to walk a mile in your shoes and sort of understand your problems better. Sometimes it might not seem that way. You might feel that they won't understand, but in my experiences, I've heard a lot of students come back and tell me that they just wish they opened up to their family members much sooner. Student counselors. I don't know if your college has a counselor, but there are most medical colleges do have student counselors. These are people who have been trained in such issues. They are professionals and they will be able to help you. Some of them are actually lucky to have more than 2 to 3 student counselors that are available on the go. There are people who are available, say, 24/7. So that is also quite good. And finally, mental health professionals. And amongst all of the options here, these are the people who are least likely to be sought help from. A lot of students and a lot of young adults find it easier to seek help from their teachers or family members or even a student counselor rather than seek help from a mental health professional. And that is sort of, it's an antithesis to the problem, isn't it? In the sense that there is professional help available, there is a lot of the confidentiality will be maintained, and some of the other factors that I will talk in my next slide. See, because what do you actually get? okay, you take that step and you make contact with one of these people. What is the help that you're going to receive for these sort of issues? You get confidentiality from these professionals. You get a sense of neutrality, which is very important because it's a sense of objectivity that sometimes your family members or your friends can't offer. A non-judgmental listener, that's something worth bargaining for, isn't it? Empathy and rapport, actually one leads to the other. The more rapport that you have with somebody, the more empathetic that person can be. So it will feel good to be understood by a professional like that. Will definitely be helpful. Cultural understanding, a lot of problems that you have are very specific to your cultural context. For example, what's happening in Kerala, what's happening in Thrissur. A medical student, no two cases of depression are the same. Please remember that. So if you have a student who has depression in, say, GMC, Thrissur, and you have a student in St. John's who has depression, the diagnosis will be the same. But the way they present, the cultural factors associated with it are completely different. But it's starting from language, starting from acceptance in a community. So you need to sort of seek help. For example, I'm not a big believer that if you're a person in Kerala doing a teleconsultation with a psychiatrist in Delhi is going to be helpful for you. So some amount of cultural understanding around the problems is extremely important, and this is something professionals around you can offer. Appropriate referral if required. For example, a mentor or a teacher sees you, they recognize what you have as red flag signs, they will know who to refer you to and when you can meet that person. So referral is also important. And what is offered is not opinionated treatment. These are treatments that are very scientific and evidence-based. Treatment that has worked with individuals who have had similar problems before. Treatment that have been approved, that are perfectly safe. And a lot of myths associated, for example, that you get addicted to medications. It is not true. Nearly all the antidepressants are not, they do not cause physical dependence as such. And for example, people think the only treatment that is available is medications. That is also not true. There's a lot of other therapies that are available. In a layman's term, if I have to call it, talking therapies, cognitive behavior therapy, which is extremely useful and sometimes as beneficial as the medication itself. You might not even need medications. And sometimes a combination of the medication and therapy is the most beneficial. There's nothing like that. So this is something that they can offer. Advice on preventive care, sometimes before a crisis increases and becomes a bigger problem, a mental health professional or a student counselor will actually be able to tell you certain preventive measures that you can take to ensure that it doesn't become any worse. So I'll finally end with this slide. I think in terms of help seeking, it's an important factor in terms of prevention of suicide, but there are certain ways that we need to think, and we need to change the way we think sometimes. We need to sort of recalibrate the way we see depression and suicide. We need to understand, I'm talking here in specific with medical students and young adults, especially because that is the target audience today, that depression is not a normal aspect of being a medical student or a doctor. Clinical depression is what I mean. Pushing through feelings of low mood or other symptoms, collateral symptoms of depression will not make anybody a good medical student or a good doctor. We often think that changing one's experience or changing treatment for these conditions will take a lot of time. Sometimes they don't. It does not require as much time as we think. And changing one's experience or a mental state does not require quitting medicine or taking time out. That's also something that actually we need to change the way we think about it. And finally, these 2 points is something that I want all of you here to wrap your head around. And that is that though there might be several barriers in coming forward, an unwillingness to seek help should never ever culminate in self-harm or suicide. Irrespective of whatever the consequences that you think are going to happen when you disclose your illness, there are any day far better repercussions than those of untreated depression. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You just took us with just a few points, covering all these topics. Thank you, sir. We're really grateful that you accommodated us in your busy schedule today. We are really grateful. I thank you on behalf of the College Union, IKEA College Union. And next, we have Dr. joining us. Welcome, Dr. M. Kishore is an associate professor of psychiatry in High and Research, Mysuru. His will be the next session.
Is it audible now?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And the topic I'm going to cover is about student initiative in suicide prevention. And I should convey my gratitudes to your medical college and the union and Dr. Sabine, who introduced us to your wonderful college. And I hope your meet is going well. In meantime, we should try to reflect upon the immense distress which is going on due to pandemic, the COVID-19 victims, the frontline warriors who are working round the clock. And we believe that there are likely to be a lot of deaths in a couple of weeks. We should also, in the meantime, reflect upon those students who have committed suicide. And this is in condolence to all of them. And
Hello, sir. Kishore, sir, we just lost you.
hello?
Yes, sir. Kishore, sir, we just lost you for a few moments. Sir.
Okay, now?
Yes, sir. It's audible, sir.
Yeah. So I was talking about how is that students are left out in suicide prevention, and no suicide prevention can work in medical college without involvement of students. When we ask this question, why? We believe that only friends can save friends most of the time. So the question we should all answer is, so what can students do to prevent suicide in the medical college? Now I'm going to talk about something we have tried at JSS Medical College. It's a very simple step called as planned chatting. I hope all the students are interested in chatting, and this approach is nothing but chatting, where friends-led group therapy is tried. It's called peer group. We have published it, and Preeti, Smriti, Ram, Rohan are our medical students. What we did was we looked at what can be tried at the phase 1, where we discussed about coping with sadness. So what we do here is that we have one session with a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist for group coordinators to go through how to carry on a group approach, how to moderate it. It's just about listening and trying to restrict the time and try to be within the topic, and then make a sense of what is that we are trying to talk, and try to be maintain the confidentiality without revealing the names. In phase 2, what we do is that we allow the students to do a group approach. So let's say there are 5 moderators or facilitators. So in each group, 5 more can join, 5 or 6, and entire 30 or 40 minutes is devoted for students to talk on how do you cope with sadness? What do you do? What is happening with our life? So the beauty of this is entirely led by the students themselves. It's a peer-led group approach. Very minimal training is required. There is no cost at all. It is left to the students, very less supervision. From the feedback we got, students just love such sessions. I personally believe that's the best preventive strategy anybody can take it up. We can take many topics. We took up anger, we took up coping with sadness, and that's why we publish. I can share this with you. I hope there are 30 listening to this talk. Just remember what magic you can do by inculcating that model in your medical college. There are, of course, certain issues about confidentiality when you are talking about gender sensitive issues, but it will not prevent you from actually carrying out this wonderful model. The second thing I would like to talk about, which we again proposed, Suhas was there, and we did it in medical college and engineering college, we suggested that young minds model. In this model, it's a proposed model for student well-being. There are three levels. Level 1, there is a students wing. Level 2, there is a faculties wing. Level 3, experts and administrative wing. So what does this student wing is about? From each batch, we pick out student volunteers, which is either selected or some people who volunteer in a ratio of 1 is to 25. Let's say your batch has 100 or 150. Some 7, 8 students become volunteers. They are trained by a senior teacher or expert in peer-to-peer counseling, which we call buddy system. So it can have a senior and junior also, depending upon this. And then weekly once for certain time, we designate free to talk sessions. So any student can pick up any of the available volunteer and meet them in a designated place and talk about what they are going through, what is happening. And the student wing can run an activity campaign, they can do competitions which help us to prevent suicide. If the students can't do it, then they will refer it to faculty wing. Faculty wing also can work independently. Let's say a student has some favorite teacher. All teachers are reasonably trained in this. So a student can directly go to faculty wing and take the approach. This is another model we have published. I would like to share. The beauty of this model is that everybody at every level is responsible and a student has many choice. When a student has choice, we believe he'll be eager to talk and take help. Now, another wonderful thing students can try, which Suhas did it in JSS Medical College, is that he came out with a book called as One Thing I Would Like to Tell You. Now, we believe every batch can come out with one ebook which can talk about many aspects of college life, including suicide, sadness, sports, and many things. What can be done is that when the students enter the medical college itself, a senior group can come out with an e-book, and this can become one of the best ways to sensitize students, make them involved, let them know what challenges they have, and then wherever they have issues, there will be a way for them to work on the strategies. So I personally think that students and faculty can come together and we can work out better models, and this might be one of the ways to prevent suicide. And I hope you know that suicide is not rare. Even if you know couple of points like previous suicide attempt, family history of suicide, recent loss, use of substances, it can make a difference. So we believe
Kishore sir, we just lost you again, sir. Kishore sir, can you hear me?
okay. Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is risky.
Which one?
This is the previous one.
This one?
Yes, sir, this slide. You just pick on that slide.
Yeah, was this clear?
This was clear, sir.
Okay, so I wanted to say that suicide is not rare, and when we talk about friends in the medical college, it is all about, if you know even couple of things like past history of suicide attempt, family history of suicide, or if somebody is taking substance like cannabis, alcohol, impulsive behavior, you can help your batchmates. I was telling that we have this ebook available in the website of the institution. Similarly, you can try in your institution. And I wanted to say that student-led initiatives in suicide prevention is all about willingness to help others and help oneself. And all initiatives will be successful only if it is led by students. With this thought, I wanted to conclude and listen to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your talk definitely had many suggestions that we will definitely try to implement in our college. Thank you, sir. We just have a couple of questions today. So the first question will be, what's the current state of research regarding the therapeutic use of hallucinogens like LSD, DMT, and psilocybin for depression and anxiety? Kishore, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's for me, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If Dr. Arun wants to take, he can take, or I can answer that question.
Arun, sir, are you here?
Thing is, like, I'm not so aware of that evidence. Yesterday also somebody has put up that query. I think Dr. Kishore, if you can just help.
Yeah, there is some evidence that some of the drugs what you're talking about, let's say LSD and other things, it acts on the many of the receptors we know. For example, dopamine receptors. Now, there is a possibility how to use some of the actions of this, but at this point of time, I would like to say it's quite dangerous to try it as a ad hoc and see what happens. So that is not something we would recommend anybody to try. If you are keenly working on some solutions and you are looking for research, yes, there is a lot of options for you to look into that. But the drug which is currently being tried in some of the institutions in India is about ketamine. I hope you have heard about ketamine, which is a anesthetic agent. There are ketamine clinics available in India who are keen to help on severe depression, but the evidence is very limited.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question would be, hello? Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible.
Next question would be about the feeling of loneliness, sir. The questioner said, feeling of loneliness in life is a major cause of depression and has been troubling me for many months. Can you please talk on this topic, sir?
I think Suhas can talk on this.
Dr. Suhas, sir? Dr. Suhas, sir? Dr. Suhas, sir, doesn't seem to be available right now. Dr. Arun, sir, could you answer the question?
Yeah, I think, see, the feeling of loneliness, when you say, you just have to see whether it is a part of depression. For example, Dr. Suhas was also mentioning in his presentation today, he is talking about something called a clinical depression. So, see, there are various ways of depression. For example, if I fail in an exam today, it's possible that I can feel depressed. That should not be taken up as a psychiatric illness. If I have many of the social situations which I have mentioned in my presentation, I can feel loneliness, but that again not a part of psychiatric illness. So my answer to the question would be, if loneliness is part of depression, which a mental health professional will be able to make an assessment on, then the treatment bang on medication that Dr. Suhas and Dr. Kishore was mentioning, plus the counseling strategy. Whereas if the loneliness is part of other situations and not a psychiatric disorder per se, then I think mostly it comes under the realm of psychological and social situation. So in which case, yesterday I think Dr. Danya was mentioning about positive thinking, um, having realistic thinking. See, so these things can actually help us to come out of the feeling of loneliness. I think the explanation is.
Suhas sir, thank you, Arun sir. Suhas sir is also trying to unmute his mic here. Suhas sir,
Yeah.
can you hear me right now? Dr. Suhas sir? Hello, sir. Dr. Suhas sir is still not able to unmute his mic. We could go to the next question. Sir, the question is, what is the best solution for a type A personality to return back to his or her normalcy? Please provide a piece of advice to a OCD category individual. Thank you. Arun sir, was the question audible?
Okay, so your question is like, what about type A personality? What is the best treatment for type A personality? Is that what you mean?
Type A personality, sir.
Okay. Okay.
And regarding the OCD in a person.
Okay. What I couldn't.
So the question
Hello?
was.
Yeah.
So the question was, please provide a piece of advice to an OCD category individual.
Okay. So OCD category individual feeling suicidal. Is that what the individual means?
I think so, sir.
Okay, fine. So there are two questions to that. One is about personality, the other one is about OCD. See, as we go back to what Dr. Sebind has mentioned yesterday or what I have mentioned today, see, any of these situations have to be taken in the context of a biopsychosocial, with which I mean that there are some biological reasons, there are some psychological reasons, and there are some social reasons also. So now when you talk about a personality, it is more of a coming in the psychological reasons. Okay, so there are various treatment methodologies, primarily in what we call it as talking therapy, as Dr. Suhas mentioned today, or counseling as a lay person will mention, or psychotherapy as a psychiatrist or a psychologist will mention. So there are therapies like that which helps a person to understand what all are their personality situations. Whenever a personality situation has a mismatch with the environment, then it becomes a problem. For example, I can give you an example wherein, see, if I am a very punctual person, Okay, and if I work as a manager, I think I would be the best manager because I can never be late. Okay, but in a real life scenario, can I be punctual everywhere? Not so possible. So what happens is like there has to be a particular personality and there has to be a environment, and if there's a mismatch between this personality and environment, that's when many of the problems arise. So we need to work at this. You modify the personality based on some counseling techniques or psychotherapy, and you also have a good match between yourself and the environment. I think that will be the way forward for a personality disorder. Now, if you look at OCD, OCD is being labeled under a psychiatric disorder. Yes, as I mentioned in my presentation, not only depression, there are multiple psychiatric disorders which are associated with suicide. So OCD is also a psychiatric disorder which has one of the best treatment available. It can be in the area of drugs, which Dr. Suhas has mentioned. He was mentioning some antidepressants. So in an OCD treatment also, we use antidepressant, but at a different dose. There is also counseling or psychotherapy available for OCD. So if an individual goes through treating OCD, I think that will be the way forward so that an OCD person need not feel upset about his problem and think about suicide. So in a nutshell, I would say a personality disorder needs more of psychotherapy and social interventions. Person with OCD will need medication and psychological intervention, and both and almost all these treatments are available throughout the world. I think.
Thank you, sir. Suhas sir is still not back. Suhas sir, are you with us? We'll move on to Kishore sir. Kishore sir, we have another question here. Sir?
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Sir, the question is, it's in the comments. Would PTSD and depression present similarly? How can we differentiate it? And is there a minimum grade or bar set for the kind of trauma involved in PTSD history?
So, PTSD and depression per se, when we understand from clinical perspective, are a different thing. Post-traumatic stress disorder usually happens when there is a catastrophe like rape, tsunami, earthquake, accident, and a person goes through severe distress when he witnesses it. It causes him to feel numb, totally uncontrol of, and it is predominantly recorded in war veterans. And some of these people with PTSD can have depression. So it is not that both will present in the same way, although it looks like similar, but need not be that both the people will present in same thing. PTSD might present with lot of anxiety, extreme sense of uneasiness to recall the event, whereas depression can present with tiredness, difficulty in remembering, problems with loss of interest, and these are the things. So they are different, and when you look at the history, you can differentiate whether it is PTSD or depression based on the person's version, how this unfolded. So I believe if you want to grade it, I don't know what you mean by grading. It means that if anybody has gone through a catastrophic event, consider PTSD as the first preference. If you think that it is not a very catastrophic event and the person is presenting with sadness, irritability, low mood, or loss of interest, give a thing into the depression. Am I clear?
Thank you, sir. Yes, you were clear. We have Suhas sir back as well. Sir, would you like to comment on the question?
I mean, not this one in particular. I think Dr. Kishore was very, very specific, and I think the sort of message that Dr. Sebind has put in the chat is also very relevant, in the sense that PTSD is a different entity from depression, and the symptoms that you see are different. Though sometimes depression can be a comorbidity in PTSD as such, but the symptoms are different. So I don't think I need to sort of elaborate further on that. But I think one of the first questions was on cannabis and alternate drugs, right? Psychedelic drugs, if I'm right.
Yes, sir. That was
Yeah,
the
so
question.
see, the thing is, you cannot actually market a medication, a drug as a medication, unless you have replicative evidence from different countries coming forward in different populations. There is a set criteria before which a medication can be marketed for treatment in a disorder. So, for example, cannabis is sometimes known to induce psychosis, first episode psychosis. So you can't actually market something without actually knowing the safety profile. Whereas if you look at conditions like use of cannabinoid analogs for, say, nausea, vomiting from chemotherapy, or say, for example, you're looking at severe muscle spasms, etc., there is enough to say not just efficacy but safety as well. But in terms of psychiatric conditions, you can't demonstrate both yet. Neither efficacy can be demonstrated, nor can you demonstrate safety. So that is partly the reason why nobody is going to recommend psychedelics or other alternative drugs like that for treatment as of now. Maybe 100 years later, 80 years later, we might be talking about a different setting. Maybe we don't know. But as of today, not possible.
Seven, sir, would you like to comment?
Hello. Yeah, can you
Seven, sir?
Can you hear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think the questions are like the PG level kind of questions. The first question about DMT and ketamine and all that, no, that's cutting edge. So they are the cut. Actually, in there is an approach called the domain. What is that? What is that, Arun? Domain approach. Now you have basically. Arun, can you help? That Macheri Keshavan and all tell, no, that approach about in US they are researching on that, no? Arun, can you tell louder?
RDoc.
Yes, correct. The RDoc, yeah. RDoc, R-DOC. So Google about RDoc, because you seem to be very highly intelligent people out there. So the RDoc approach means that, rather than, see, till now you were diagnosing psychiatric disorders based on symptoms. No, I told you about feeling sad, lack of interest, lack of energy. But RDoc approach involving things like using a neuropsychological test or using genetic markers to looking for serotonin genes. So all these collected together and to see that how it all fits together. So that kind of cutting edge things, they are looking at how these receptors are involved. So how do ketamine act and how are the serotonin various, there are kind of so many subtypes of the serotonin receptors, and depending on the action on that, that can have effect on mood, can have effect on psychotic symptoms also. So it's a cutting edge kind of thing. So, but science grows through research, no? So you need good kind of research. So we need an RCT kind of thing. And if an RCT, randomized control trial, can prove that ketamine has a good evidence, then we need to research really into that kind of molecular level, how that works. But all these drugs of abuse, the problem is that there is an addiction. So all these things, the DMT or ketamine or LSD, the problem is that they have an effect on dopamine and effect on pleasure. So what you want in depression is not pleasure. So pleasure means a release of dopamine and you get a high. But that is not what is we're looking for in treating a person with sadness. There is not just biology involved in sadness. It is also you need to look at into his thoughts and why he feels sad. I like that. So these kind of approaches of looking at molecules, I feel that they have an inherent limitation. So just a molecule may not help a person to come out of depression and to prevent depression in the future. You also you need to look into his psychology and also look at his behavior. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Suha sir, we have just two more questions to deal with. Suha sir, I'll read the questions in the comments. I've just posted it.
Yeah,
It reads, as a medical student, failing exams always haunt me. I feel I'm not good enough for this after all. My friends were able to succeed. Why couldn't I? This question just haunts me more and more. And all the time what I do is divert my attention from such thoughts. That does not give me any fruitful result. What am I supposed to do?
Okay. I don't know if I can perfectly answer this question. I will definitely try. But what this particular medical student has asked is something very common. I'm sure that many of us, even when we were medical students, had similar questions. So I will answer along two lines. One is the part where this person said, my friends were able to succeed. Why couldn't I? I don't think that comparing yourself to somebody around you is going to help. And especially with marks, because when you were in your second PUC, you were school, I'm sure all of you were toppers. But once you come to the field of medical college, everybody does well. And then you sort of start comparing, you start questioning, am I not doing enough? Am I not doing well? So that is a way of, I think there's a change of thinking, cognition that needs to change there. The other thing is to sort of find out why you're not doing well. Is it something, it could have nothing to do with psychiatric illness or even anything related to a mental health condition per se. It might be something to do with faulty study methods, lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, or even some other conditions like, not getting enough time, whatever it is. So it is your job to introspect and to sort of find out what the reason is. And sometimes you can take external help for that, your teachers help, a mentor's help, or even a family member's help to sort of give you some objective feedback as to what you're not doing right, to see if you can improve. Sometimes even medical conditions also, psychiatric conditions also. For example, I've had quite a few medical students who are extremely intelligent but not did well, and they seem to have had ADHD. So adult ADHD could be one reason. Then obviously you go to other conditions like depression, etc. So you need to treat the primary cause. See, just like in fever could be because of so many things. You would treat the pharyngitis or whatever is causing it. So similarly, treating the cause in case if it's a psychiatric illness will definitely help. And also the last thing I would like to say, I don't think that you should, if you're doing reasonably well, because I have heard people who have gotten around 70%, 60% still say I've not done well enough. I should get 85% and 90% in medicine, So unrealistic expectations that you set with academics could also be one reason. If I could just ask this person, I don't want to know who it is, but if this person could just think that, your marks is not everything. The marks that you get will not sort of define definitely the kind of doctor you will become. For example, now this person has been in a conference call which has had doctors like Sebin, Dr. Kishore, Dr. Arun, and myself. Did any one of you ask what marks we got in our second year MBBS, third year MBBS, or this thing? No, right? See, because beyond a point, marks don't matter. I know people who have not done really well in medicine who have gone on to do excellently well, So it doesn't define the sort of doctor you become. So my summary is that look at what the reason it is that you're not doing well. Could it be something non-psychiatric first? Get objective feedback on it. Even if it is critical feedback, it is okay. Number two, is it a psychiatric problem? If so, who can you seek help with? And number three is that changing the way you think about it in your expectations with academics. So I hope I have sort of answered this question.
Arun sir, next we have quite a long question. I hope Arun sir and Kishore sir will together be able to deal with it. I'll just read the question. Kishore sir, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, I'll just read the question, sir. I hope both of you can answer it. I am depressed, but I'm not. I'm happy if I get momentarily angry at small things. Yes, it's these mood swings that make me all the more depressed. I'm clueless of my future. I really want to start studying and make up for the time I wasted all this while. But I can't overcome my addiction to phone or social media. Because practically I can't take a complete break. Every single thing in my life is connected to my phone one way or the other. Even if I need to study, that too. Also, the more I use my phone, the more negative, tired, and frustrated I become. I'm tired of listening to motivations because I do know that I need to overcome this addiction. Please tell me a real practical solution to overcome this.
Dr. Kishore, can you just start so that?
Okay, I'll try to answer this. It's a very interesting, and we are coming across numerous students, not just from medical field, but from all branches of sciences and arts, I believe, and especially in the COVID-19, where everything is done through your phones and your laptops. There's no way that you will be able to escape from your exposure to the gadgets. Now, the question we have to answer is, how much of our minds and brains are tuned for such kind of exposure? The answer is we are not tuned, and our mind and our brains are not tuned for continuous exposure to a non-living thing. So what is the best thing people are trying to do is that please set the limit for your gadget exposure. Every mobile phone now, when you have a smartphone, whether it's Android or iOS, there is a limit setting for the every app. When you set a limit, let's say you have set for your Gmail, you have set for your gaming, you have set for your WhatsApp, you have set for Facebook, you know how much of exposure you want to get and what is the time at which you want to get it. It is just like putting a timetable for yourself. And you have to understand, when you look at the screen all the time, your mind and your brain is going to be exhausted. So what is the best is that you need to give periodic breaks for your eyes and periodic breaks for your thoughts. There is no other way than setting limits for your gadget exposure. The best thing is that start with the smallest thing you can do and set limit today. 1 hour of WhatsApp, 40 minutes or 1 hour of Facebook, 1 hour of your Gmail or other things. Then you will be little more on the hold on trying to restrict your exposure. And also just check whether you are an individual who seems to be little more inclined to trying new things and getting hooked to it. For example, if you have tried something new and you can't get away such from that, people can really get into trouble when we talk about this impulsive behavior. If you really have this habit of trying something and getting hooked to it, I think it is time for you to take some help. There's nothing bad about taking help, and I believe there are so many platforms to take help. So I would just put this word across. Start setting limit to your screen exposure and start exposing yourself to life around you. Dr. Arun?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kishore. I think it is a different perspective. So to add to what Dr. Kishore has contributed, since I have attended yesterday's meeting also, I'll just take it through that. For example, yesterday, I think the audience would recollect what Dr. Sebin has mentioned. Like, see, for depression, it has to be pervasive and persistent, which means it has to cut across various situations. It has to cut across different time frame. Then only you consider it as a depression which needs a psychiatric help. I think that was Dr. Sebin's point yesterday. So from whatever text the young doctor has message, see, I just read it out. I am depressed, but I am not. I'm happy, yet I get momentarily angry. So from this itself, probably you get and feel that okay, this is not as depression which has to be considered as a psychiatric disorder or anything, but it is worth meeting a professional for a clarification. The second aspect of it is, I'll just read up some of the slides which Dr. Manoj has yesterday shared with all of us, in which one of the early slides were medical students, some specific constructs to consider. One was perfectionism, wherein you consider a high standard. The other one is high expectation. Then Dr. Manoj spoke about something like a hamster wheel, where a medical student will go through non-ending stress. Then shifting status, wherein a medical student will go through a sense of failure. So he has mentioned quite a few things which any human being can think about himself, more so a medical student. So now if I go through the text which the esteemed doctor has shared, so you can actually see these things there, wherein the doctor talks about perfectionism, then doctor talks about his expectation, then the doctor talks about non-ending stress. The doctor tries to do something, but then it doesn't fall in place as he wish. Then he again goes back into that. So you see there are a lot of psychological factors in this particular individual, which probably needs to be corrected. When I say corrected, don't take it as a problem or anything. The doctor feels that, okay, because of all this, I am feeling I have a problem. So since the doctor feels he has to come out of that, okay, let's sort out the problem. But I would mostly feel that this particular problem which the doctor has spelled out about self or any of his colleagues, I would say it is more of a psychological area that we need to deal with. Now, the psychological, how can we deal with that is, I think we have already had a very good presentation by Dr. Suhas and Dr. Kishore, wherein that particular individual can feel free to share it with somebody, or the particular doctor can actually meet as a group and share it and see how to move forward. So my point is like, from what Dr. Sevind has mentioned last day, whatever the doctor feels doesn't seem to be a depression. There are a lot of psychological reasons for him to feel upset about. Yes, we need to get rid of that, for which a group kind of a setting or opening up self can be a better option. Alongside, Dr. Kishore has given a very valid point, like we need to have a control on ourselves.
Thank you, Arun sir. Kevin sir, would you like to comment?
No, the addiction. I told yesterday about the reward pathway. No, if you remember. So we should look at why people get into addiction. So there are various possibilities of addiction. So if we go to all these addiction because otherwise our lives are not happy, no. So if you have a schedule where you devote time to interesting things, it could be individual, like if you like reading or exercise or sports or music, so different things that excite you. Okay, so when you do that, your brain actually gets a dopamine rush, and so you will not need to go to whatever the addiction thing that you're getting addicted to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last question of the day. Suhas sir, are you there with us?
I'm here. Please go ahead.
So the question is, I've just posted it. How to let go of a friend who is now triggering my depression and making me feel guilty about my depression?
I mean, it's a very interesting question. So there are two things to this. One is you yourself are depressed, and your friend seems to be very unaware of it and very not very sensitive of it also. So why not just have an open conversation with your friend and just be very honest? Sometimes the best thing to do is to be very blunt, be very honest, use objective information and tell him that you're not doing well, and the kind of behavior that your friend is exhibiting is actually making it worse for you. It's already difficult and it's making it worse for you. So maybe even taking a break from that friend for some time is all right. So I think these are these are just practical things that you could immediately do, and I really hope this person does something about it.
Arun sir, would you like to comment on the question as well?
Yeah, I think open communication is what Dr. Suhas has recommended. I think it's a very relevant information. Second part, I would also try to put in across is like probably like, see, you need to stand for your rights, with which I mean like you need to be assertive. Okay, so I think that particular doctor who has texted has to talk to the dear friend, as Suhas was mentioned, and at the end of that, probably I think there has to be an open communication to that dear friend that, see, I'm getting affected, and so with which I'm becoming more aware of myself, and I'm becoming assertive about what I need and what I don't need. Okay, I understand that when you have a dear friend, the relationship can be quite close, but that doesn't mean that you need not have boundaries between individual people. No? So that boundary is what we mean by assertiveness. We can define those boundaries. So I will add on to what Dr. Suhas has mentioned. Definitely an open communication, be truthful to yourself. And at the end of that, if you feel that I need to be assertive, because being assertive is a good way of coping.
Just to add one point, see, sometimes it will have nothing to do with your friend. Sometimes depression is so severe that anything and everything can trigger you. Things that did not trigger you before, even say a friend opening your hostel door a little more loudly, a friend calling you more than once a day, so a friend texting you. So things that are not usually triggers can then become triggers when you yourself is suffering from severe depression. So sometimes getting that feedback from a psychiatrist or a mental health professional will definitely help. So the way you think of, I have seen a lot of individuals who have had severe depression where the triggers have been so very, very trivial. You cannot even imagine it's a trigger. So that's also something that this medical student or doctor who posted this question should really consider.
Thank you, sir. Kishore, sir, do you like to add anything to that? You had already mentioned student circles. Is this kind of a problem common amongst those student circles?
Yes, it is common. The one thing I would like to differ is that do not consider everything as depression. A sadness and uneasiness in a friendship is quite common, and it is 10 times more common than clinical condition called depression. So what you are going through could be a normal thing that somebody is trying to create uneasiness you, or you are a person who takes things little more deeper than other people. So reflect upon what is the impact it is having on you and where all it is affecting. We call depression only when it is continuously affecting you for more than 2 weeks. It is hampering all your activities. You are feeling low. You have lost interest. I do not think that many of the things you might be considering as depression could be depression as such. But yes, sadness can differ. And I agree with Dr. Suhas and Dr. Arun, who said that what are the simple ways you can carry out this. One of this is also about talking to another friend and see what that person thinks. Sometimes friends are real good advisors. They would definitely recommend you either to move away from that friendship or be clear on what you want to communicate and maintain that. So I think it's perfectly okay to talk, set limits in your friendship, and reflect upon whether you are really depressed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think with that, we come to the end of today's session. First of all, I'd like to thank.
Basil, can I just say one thing? And
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Definitely, sir.
no, I just wanted to share that in the last 3-4 months, there's my MBBS batch group. I belong to 1996 batch. I joined MBBS in 1996. But in the last 3 months after the lockdown, we got to know so much more each other, and I could see that some of the fault lines, like in 1996 when I joined MBBS, we had split amongst us because based on politics, then based on whether we are hostlers or day scholars, things like that. And some of these splits have remained till now, and some of the friendships have also remained till now. And a friend is a very valuable thing to have. I have found that when I have a friend, I can share many things which I cannot share to my parents or I cannot share to my teachers, but to a friend, a true friend who understands me, and I'm able to share that thing, that is a big help. That is a big strength. And friendship doesn't happen one day. You have to nurture it, like you grow a plant. You have to keep watering it, you have to provide it sunlight, and you have to be willing to forgive some faults. And we are humans, we make mistakes, so you should be able to apologize your mistakes, listen to that person. Friendships are very valuable asset to have in your life. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think with that, if we do not have any more questions, that is the end of today's session. I would like to thank Dr. Suhas sir and Sebin sir who came to talk to us today's schedule. I am really grateful on behalf of the college union and the students that you were willing to talk to us today. Thank you, all of you. This is the end of TMC Talks 1.0, Mind Your Mind. And this is also the end of Augmenta 2.0 as well, which we had to shift to the virtual world from the real world. Heartfelt gratitude to all of you and to all the students who have joined us. And I really hope and pray that the various techniques and the various advices that all of the guests have given us over the course of 2 days will help us and others combat whatever they're going through amidst this lockdown. Thank you, sirs. Thank you, everybody. Good night.